Welcome, everyone. I'm Tracy Fitzpatrick, and I'll be your moderator today. Thank you so much for joining us here at Netcom Learning, a market leader in promoting lifelong learning, training, and talent development solutions. We are very excited to host today's event, Zero Trust Security, Building a Robust Defense Framework. Presenting today's topic is Wesley Van Straten. Wesley is an accomplished cybersecurity and network infrastructure instructor with over 20 years of experience delivering high-quality training in Cisco, Checkpoint, and EC Council courses. His expertise in Cisco spans critical areas such as enterprise, service provider, security, and collaboration technologies, where he has successfully trained students worldwide. With a proven track record in both in-person and virtual instructor-led training for various authorized training centers, Wesley has helped countless learners achieve their certification goals and enhance their career prospects. Now, please bear in mind that this is an overview of a very robust topic. We offer a collection of technical and business courses that can be tailored to your specific requirements. If you are interested in a further discussion, you can make an appointment with our learning consultants through our website at netcomlearning.com. Today's session is also being recorded, so you'll get free access to the recording in the next 24 hours via email. Netcom Learning helps customers build innovative learning organizations by achieving a smarter workforce, adapting to change, and driving growth. We do this with a broad catalog of offerings, developing customized learning plans, and our global delivery capabilities. Since 1998, we have been empowering organizations with our managed learning services to help them reach optimal performance results and address challenges. We do have 9 practice areas in which we specialize. They encompass people, process, and technology training. And today's presentation is from the security practice area. Netcom Learning offers a comprehensive training portfolio of courses for the topic being covered today. Our upcoming classes include various trainings on the given courses. You can also access a variety of marketing assets, such as the free training and blogs, by clicking on the available event handout. These offerings can be found with a simple search on our website at netcomlearning.com. This masterclass will explore the core principles of Zero Trust Security, focusing on building a robust defense framework with advanced security solutions. Designed for professionals across industries, this session aims to equip participants with essential knowledge and strategies to strengthen their organization's security posture. Attendees will also discover the key components of a zero trust architecture, learn practical implementation approaches, and explore essential technologies to mitigate risks. And now I would like to give you a quick overview of the logistics before we get started. To begin with, you do have the option to view in full screen by clicking on the full screen button on the right side of the GoToWebinar viewer. Simply hit the escape key to exit the full screen. Everyone has been muted except for our presenters. Feel free to submit any questions you have for the presenters here in the questions pane, and we will address them at the end of the session. And to get the best out of today's events, we've included the slides, courses we talk about, and marketing assets in the handouts section of your GoToWebinar viewer. You may refer to them at any time to get a better understanding of today's topic. And we do realize that some of you may have to leave early and want to let you know that as you do leave the session today, you will be presented with a short survey. We would like to request for you to take a quick moment to participate in that survey. Your feedback really helps us understand your learning experience and improve our future sessions for you. The survey answers are measured on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 representing outstanding and 1 representing poor. And now I'd like to pass this over to our trainer to present today's topic. Hey, Wesley, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great, thank you, and thank you for joining the Zero Trust Security Building a Robust Defense Framework Masterclass. My name is Wesley van Straten, and I'll be taking you through just some of the high-level ideas around Zero Trust and how it can be positioned to secure your enterprise network environment. It is it's a point of contention for some organizations, the ability to implement Zero Trust, as it is sometimes seen as a technology that clashes with the idea of single sign-on, when in fact, in practicality, the two technologies can be implemented to complement and supplement one another. So we'll have a bit of a focus in the upcoming sessions around SSO, around how it affects Zero Trust, and essentially more focus will be provided in terms of how SSO can be made to be an advantage in a Zero Trust environment. We'll have obviously also just a bit of a discussion around what exactly is Zero Trust for those of us that may not be too familiar with the concept of Zero Trust, and then gradually get you into the Cisco official definition, as I like to call it, and identify this is exactly what Zero Trust means in the Cisco architectural design concepts and documentation and guidelines. Ultimately, we are going to be focusing on the Cisco approach at this juncture, and we are going to be looking at how Cisco's approach has allowed them to position their technologies as one of the big players in the industry with regards to Zero Trust technology implementation. Let me head on over to the next slide. So maybe to give you just a bit of information around myself, I am a Cisco instructor, also a consultant, implementing Cisco security technologies. I also have exposure in some of the other security specializations, which we're not going to get into in this particular session, but love Cisco technologies, from collaboration through to wireless, through to service provider, and effectively now we're looking at security. And security is just, it's one of those things, right, that's pervasive and ubiquitous, always in the back of the minds of network engineers, no matter what you specialize in, right? No matter what you specialize in. So we've got a quick agenda that we're going to be looking at. A nice introduction. We're going to be looking at Zero Trust as a general concept, and then look at how Cisco looks at their approach to implementing Zero Trust within the organization. So Zero Trust is but one word, it's but one concept that needs to be able to play nice with other concepts, and Cisco is acutely aware of this. And there needs to be a simplification and a model to implement Zero Trust. And that's exactly what we can be getting into once we start looking at Cisco's Zero Trust security frameworks. Once we start looking at Cisco Safe, Secure Access for Everyone, I love that term, and then how it pertains to Zero Trust specifically. We are going to be getting into some of the technologies. This is I believe this is going to be a 2-hour session. We've got enough material to keep us busy for longer than that, but we're going to try and keep it to 2 hours. And also, after we've done all the bits and pieces, try to fit all the bits and pieces together, we'll have a Q&A session where some questions will be positioned, and we'll have a look at answering those particular questions. Great, so let's move it onwards. I believe the next slide should be coming up round about now. We've got a nice introduction to Zero Trust. So what is it? What is Zero Trust in a nutshell? I would argue that Zero Trust, and a lot of people have done a good job at defining it in just a single sentence to try and explain it and try and get the creative juices started with explaining a concept like this. So Zero Trust is effectively authentication that is going to be done in such a way where you don't extend trust to an authentication session and then allow that authentication to access all authorization elements in your network. So you effectively want to have a approach in Zero Trust where nothing's trusted on the internal network. It's kind of why it's the the naming of the term essentially indicates that there is no trust. So think of your network as, or the traditional network, where you've got the outside network, you've got the inside network, and then you have trust that is intrinsically extended to the internal network, right? Hey, it's your network, it's the enterprise network, it's your enterprise network. And then you've got everything on the outside that then effectively would not be trusted, and by default, and there's good reasons for not trusting information that originates on the internet. We want to take that same approach, that zero trust that we have practiced for so many years and decades on external networks, and just splash it onto the internal network. So no authentication that gets done on the internal network by default has access to everything, or access to all services that a particular user account should be privy to. There need to be numerous authentication or authorization, or what we call dynamic authentication, that needs to be done in order to gain a handle and put your finger on the pulse of that of those permissions that will be exercised by your identity system, perhaps by your Cisco ISE, and essentially we want to be able to limit the ability of attackers from compromising a single account and have the keys to the kingdom. That's really what zero trust comes down to, is the ability to rein in access to our systems, especially in very, very sensitive systems like financial services sector organizations, industrial control mechanisms, the enterprise networks, where, and most people out there would be represented by being employed or working for a straightforward enterprise network, where there's no funny OT or financial services sector information or medical information going about, but you want to be able to apply the same thing to enterprise networks as well. Great. So, and invariably, some of the audience members would be part of a financial services sector organization or a governmental organization, for example, and the idea around zero trust has been borrowed from these very sensitive environments and extended onto the enterprise environment. And there's so many different elements to today's networks. Long gone are the days where it's just data and just internal users accessing the network. Now you've got to contend with bring your own device. You've got to contend with the Internet of Things, or IoT devices, where people bring in consumer grade, their own personalized consumer grade appliances, smart appliances, and utilize this and expect to be connected and access all of the sensitive information that makes up your enterprise network. Something's got to be done. Something's got to be done. And in walks zero trust as the savior of all things security. Well, maybe I'm pushing it a bit now, but zero trust is a pivotal concept in any security discussion. No matter what security course you jump onto, a discussion without zero trust is simply not a complete security discussion. And it is meant to touch the entire network. I'm kind of going through some of the bullet points I see that's listed on the screen as well. But effectively, it has the potential to exercise security on every bit of technology within your network enterprise. But it's not meant to make things more complex. Quite the opposite, where zero trust can be implemented together with technologies like single sign-on, that explicitly exist to make it more seamless for users to be able to access their resources. So from that perspective, zero trust isn't really, it's not the kind of technology that's going to make things overly complex. Definitely not. Great. Just one more thing about Internet of Things. It's very few organizations have a clear-cut approach to taking charge of their Internet of Things or IoT environment. The ability to identify these assets and manage these assets is critical in the world of security. You know, I also do pen testing from time to time and train some of the ethical hacking courses. And effectively, this is something that is a pandemic at the moment, where many of these IoT devices are simply not designed with security in mind. The operating systems on many, or if not most, of IoT devices are horrible. It's very slapdash, and it becomes a massive attack surface for organizations. And the other thing around zero trust is that we need to try and lessen that attack surface, or at least manage that attack surface, bring down the risk level for the organization down to an acceptable level. You can never truly eliminate risk. Risk will always be there. We need to live with it. We need to play with it even, but we need to also understand the assets of the organization. We need to understand their appetite for risk, and then apply zero trust to meet those specific requirements. And the thing about zero trust also, that just one last idea before we move on to the next slide, is that it really does touch on everything. When I see zero trust, my mind gets immediately taken to authentication and authorization. Splash in a Cisco ISE in order to get dynamic authentication policies going, the ability to integrate with existing identity management devices like Active Directory, for example. So there need to be integration options to get zero trust to hit the ground running with not just Cisco devices, but invariably all of the disparate solutions and software that no doubt is running on our clients' networks. Great, thank you. I think we can move on to the next slide. Let's go have a look at what zero trust puts on the table. So key zero trust strengths. The idea is to, well, before we had zero trust, the idea was that you would automatically extend trust to all users on the internal network. You would trust them intrinsically. Zero trust sounds like, it kind of says, well, we don't trust our users intrinsically anymore. It sounds like a bad thing, but it's not. It's not. The thing is that it's not users per se that's attacking the enterprise network. It's not your employees. The concern is around compromised accounts. And we need to be able to identify when accounts authenticate, what permissions they're going to exercise on the network, and we need to be able to do an accounting, there needs to be an audit trail of everything from beginning to end for each and every individual user or service that is gaining access to the internal network. That effectively is what zero trust is also trying to put on the table, is that we have the ability to, even though you implement something like single sign-on, there needs to be an element around enforcing the authentication, which is technically the authentication is the who behind the connection. Then we also need to look at the authorization that'll be extended to the individual. And if additional authorization is required, we can then separately authorize access to various elements within the network. So the idea that SSO breaks down zero trust is an old wives' tale, if I'm allowed to say that. It's an old wives' tale, and it's exciting. It's exciting that something like SSO can be implemented to a degree where it further supplements zero trust. So we need to continuously verify trust with the Cisco Secure platform approach or architectural design. We need to also respond to change in trust. If there is change that's required, then we need to be able to extend those zero trust policies towards the edge of the organization or to the cloud environment through a CASB, for a cloud access security broker, or to the wireless environment, should there be BYOD and IoT devices that's hooking up to the corporate Wi-Fi and or to the guest network, that we need to be able to duly authenticate and make sure that these authentications stay in their lane, that the guest users only experience, the they break out to the internet. The corporate users accesses the internal network, the soft, mushy inside center of your network, as it's sometimes called, and they only access that which is pertinent to their job role. I know what you guys are thinking. You're probably thinking, well, there's going to be a little bit of a discussion around least privilege at some point. And yeah, zero trust works perfectly with least privilege. The idea in least privilege is that users only access those resources through permissions, only the minimum amount of permissions needed to perform their job roles. The end goal ultimately is to try and make it as excruciatingly painful for the attackers to get onto the network. And even if they do, they're not going to get very far, because least privilege, they can only access X, Y, and Z. With zero trust, well, if they want to be able to move laterally within the organization, they're going to be prompted for additional authentications or rigorous controls around additional authorizations to get additional permissions to access these other services if they want to move laterally in the organization. That's in a nutshell, that zero trust and least privilege right there. Great. So I see there's also mentioned there around the campus network, which is your traditional enterprise network, really. And then data centers that deals with the ability to access securely the services, the swathe of services and data and resources that's available to end users and workstations and contractors and auditors and who else that need to be able to access the data center for and only that part of the data center, and maybe also only for a certain limited period of time. The Cisco Secure Platform enables you to do all of the above, Then looking at zero trust security frameworks. So the following table just shows some of these frameworks that Cisco utilizes in what they call the Cisco Zero Trust Framework. Now Cisco is a special company. They've got their hands in everything. It sounds horrible saying that, but there's wireless, there's service provider technologies, there's of course the traditional routing and switching enterprise technologies, there's SD-WAN, there's SD access, there's cloud access, and of course Cisco's got technologies that allows you to the secure deployment and access and migration to all of the above technologies is available in Cisco's store. So, and Cisco is one of those organizations that also is trusted by many governments around the world. So we do see a nice alignment with the requirements that you would expect to see from organizations like the National Institute for Standards and Technology, the Cybersecurity Framework, known as the CSF for short, as well as the cybersecurity outfit or the cybersecurity agency in the States. And Cisco achieves the requirements of these very, very sensitive organizations that have got very particular requirements by compartmentalizing the zero trust security framework into multiple elements. And Cisco reckons, well, no two organizations are alike. No two governmental organizations are alike. No two entities effectively are alike. And Cisco then creates these elements of the security framework where you can choose which element you need within your organization to be able to meet a particular compliancy or a particular certification, a particular standardization, for example, or just a security goal. And then what you need to be able to implement in order to achieve that goal, you need to also understand the risk. You need to understand the threat itself. And the idea behind these security frameworks is once you've got an understanding of the organization's risk level and risk appetite, you also have the organization, as part of that risk assessment, understand their assets and the various risk ratings or risk levels associated with those assets. And you then also understand, as part of the risk assessment, also understand the potential for compromise on some of these assets that may have a higher propensity towards being attacked, and that may have a higher impact if those assets were ever to be compromised. Then Cisco identifies what we call business flows. This is what you need to put in place in order to accurately, according to Cisco best recommended practice, in order to secure those environments, implementing all the while the zero trust security framework. Great. So we're going to be looking at securing user and their devices. I'm thinking of the moment when I see that, I'm thinking the Cisco ISE, man. It's all about identity. It's all about identifying the who behind the connection, giving them their permissions, and then dynamically assign those permissions as and when the user requests it or requires it. Then we have network and cloud security, where we start looking at the usual suspects within these environments. We would be looking at firewalls, IPSs. I would imagine even going as far as looking at email security appliances, web security appliances. Cloud security, you would be looking at things like Umbrella and cloud access security brokers. And Cisco's got a huge number of solutions that's purpose-built for these unique environments. So we're going to be looking at application and data security, which is the last line or row there at the bottom. And when I look at that, I'm thinking of, well, data security, it's going to have to also implement IPS that allows you to do things like normalize TCP streams, for example. I'm just scratching the surface here. Just some examples of what Cisco appliances are able to bring to the table to speak to the security framework. When looking at applications, we can outright identify the applications, identify how these applications behave, and establish baselines. And if the application starts behaving in a way that's outside of the baseline, then we can identify this as a potential compromise or an indicator of compromise. We call these things IOCs. I'm also thinking in terms of specific solutions in the Cisco store. App Dynamics would be a classic example of achieving that. I know that recently Cisco also added SAP to App Dynamics that allows App Dynamics to monitor the application, identify if the application is first and foremost working at optimum efficiency, and also monitor zero trust, monitor security, identify when these applications have been potentially compromised. We have to know, a typical mean time to detection in the world of security is 200 days. 200 days, that's horrible. That's almost a year. That the organization does not know that a compromise has occurred. Only 200 days after the fact, somebody realizes, well, that service is not really supposed to be doing that. Let's have a closer look. Lo and behold, Cisco means to bring down your mean time to detection through the zero trust security framework down to 48 hours, no more than 48 hours. Great. Sometimes I leave out Cisco's cyber threat intelligence capabilities in these sections, and it has to be noted. I think it is noted a little bit later on in the slide deck, but it does indicate also Cisco's investment and their go-to-market strategy, which is simply, hey, if our clients' networks are secure, that drives Cisco's bottom line. It's a yin yang, right? So they've got a real investment in keeping your network safe. Right. So the Cisco Talos, by the way, TALOS. There's different pronunciations for this, but Cisco Talos is Cisco's official cyber threat intelligence outfit. And what's nice about Talos, by the way, if I'm allowed to digress just a little bit, is that when you partner with somebody like Cisco and this zero trust security framework from Cisco, you're not just getting protection from Cisco's research and development prowess and capabilities, which is quite phenomenal, by the way. It's Cisco's in terms of their global market share. They're sitting at the top spot for the last 2 decades. Even during the pandemic period, Cisco was able to handsomely hold on to their market share, where others unfortunately unfortunately faulted. We're not going to obviously get into names, but it's something that's nice for me as a Cisco representative and a Netcom learning representative to give this kind of news to you guys. So the other thing that I wanted to mention about Cisco Talos is that you're getting protections from Cisco's competitors as well. I can't believe I'm saying this, but Cisco is one of those organizations that knows in order to drive their bottom line, they've got to be able to make sure that their technologies, inclusive of zero trust, works in mixed or disparate vendor environments. Cisco is actually a founding member of the Cyber Threat Alliance, which is essentially a come together of different security vendors coming together to exchange cyber threat intelligence and make this intelligence immediately available to clients around the world in the form of attack signatures, for example. And these attack signatures you can then, as a enterprise client of Cisco, you would then be able to implement into something like your identity services engine, your ISE, and you'd be able to then enjoy real-time or near real-time protection from the latest and greatest threats, and also the ability to identify the threats that may also be identified as 0 days, for example. Right, so there's also quite a bit of mention around these things that I've mentioned. They just really just quickly identify what's a rogue actor? How does it fit into the bigger scheme of things? Well, a rogue actor is going to be someone that some people would like to call a hacker. These guys go by, well, and ladies, guys and ladies go by different names, but threat actors, rogue actors, these are the attackers. They are the guys and girls that want to access that soft, mushy inside center of your network without being authorized to do so. And these rogue actors could be anyone. You know, we kind of have this Hollywood idea of the rogue actor being somebody on the outside that's sitting on their laptop, no social life, and within 20 seconds they can get into any network they want. It's not the way this works, actually. But these rogue actors could also be disgruntled employees. It could be somebody that's very close to the organization that already has the keys to the kingdom. So we have to be intrinsically aware of zero trust, extending security policies as you would with rogue actors on the outside to rogue actors that is on the inside. You know, I was looking at a report, a DEFCON report. The FBI hosts DEFCON. I didn't know that for the longest time, but the FBI hosts DEFCON. DEFCON comes up with a nice little report. And by the way, hats off to the guys at the FBI that reaches out to the hacker community, and I'm sure that they also get some talent from that pool that gets involved. But the report was quite interesting in that it mentioned that up to 96% of network level attacks, network-based attacks targeting enterprises originate not on the outside, but on the inside of your network. You see why zero trust is such an intensely important discussion to have? Absolutely. Any day of the week and twice on Sundays. It has to be part of every organization security approach. I think we are about ready to move into the next section here. Okay, so there's a bit of a continuation. A couple of questions that organizations need to be able to ask themselves and say, hey, well, how well can we answer this? And maybe give them a bit of a scorecard. And yeah, if you do that, that's kind of what we do in Pentest when we do things like risk assessments. Ask questions, and based on the answers from your client, your esteemed client, you gain direction into where the security conversation is going. And the same thing applies here. They say that the ideal end state of your zero trust for user and device security would allow your enterprise to answer the following. Are my users really who they say they are? How can you truly know somebody is who they say they are? You know, if I've got your password, does that mean my name is now Neha, or my name is some other person from some other organization? No, absolutely not. So we need more than just usernames and passwords. We need much, much more. And Cisco Security Solutions allows us to get into these questions, get into the absolute detail around what needs to be in place in order to be able to answer these questions with confidence, right? With confidence. So I'm thinking with the first question, you would be able to identify users by confirming that they are, well, that they've got the username and password, that they may have multi-factor authentication enabled that further proves that they say who they are, and also throw in certificates for good measure. So certificates are great because it provides a way to set up non-repudiation, which is a fancy way of saying that we've got beyond any reasonable doubt, we can identify that this person who is who they say they are because we've used a PKI or public key infrastructure system to answer to that question. Great, and we can make it very seamless for the users. Most users don't even know that they're using digital certificates. Beyond them visiting websites and looking at the lock icon, they've got no idea. It's completely transparent to the user. So we can have awesome security together with seamless connectivity for our users. And for so many years, it's been the opposite, where the need for seamless connectivity kind of drops the scales for better security. If you've got better security, then that drops the scales negatively towards seamless connectivity. That's not true anymore. Luckily, it's not true anymore. So they mention other questions like what devices are connecting to my applications and data. You want to know what's communicating. You want to know who's communicating. I've mentioned what first. Did you misspoke? Ways? Well, no, not really. Because nowadays we have the ability to also not just authenticate users, but we can fully authenticate their hardware as well. So it's been a headache for us in security for many years. How do you splash security and extend security policy to devices that you don't have administrative control over? Well, the thing is that your network is your network, and you've paid good money to get that network where it is today. So you have the fullest of rights as a enterprise, as the admin for that enterprise, to say, well, I can limit who accesses this very sensitive information. And in many cases, you're mandated by law and by compliance regulations to do exactly that, right? So, and we do have the ability to do this very, very, very nicely, very accurately. We can utilize the Cisco ISE, for example, to perform a network admission control function on hardware devices. So not only are we authenticating users, we're authenticating the hardware that gets onto our networks. You can do a full security posture assessment on any mobile, laptop, desktop, or IoT device before it jumps onto your network and has the ability to access resources. So that's powerful. And if they don't fit the bill, if there's anything unbecoming of, let's say, a corporate laptop that doesn't have the latest patches installed, you can quarantine. You can even automatically remediate some of these sores, and then effectively this comes down to you being able to exercise full control over how people and how hardware accesses your environment, and exercise zero trust while we're at it. We don't intrinsically allow these devices to access the network just because the user is fully vetted. We want to be able to identify things like, if I'm allowed to use another example, let's say you've got iPhones that's hooking up to your environment. Consumer grade devices, people bring them in, it's their private personal devices, they jump onto the network, and people expect to be connected with it to their work environment with any device from anywhere they are these days. And we can make it happen as esteemed network and security personnel. But the idea that I'm trying to get to is, what if that iPhone has been jailbroken, or that Android device has been rooted? Now we have ourselves a bit of a problem, because these devices typically would not be jailbroken unless there's some malicious some malicious approach on the part of the owner of that device. And you can very easily identify, hey, I've got Jack, checks out, Active Directory likes him, the permissions check out as well, but it seems like Jack's iPhone is not exactly on par with security policy. Quarantine that device, shun that device. If it's on a wireless network, we have the ability to shun wireless devices, and then remediate. If you're quick enough, you can catch some of these attackers in the act, or of course facilitate assisting users if they've been the target of these attacks and they are inadvertently accessing the network with compromised equipment. Compromised equipment is a big deal. It's sometimes not as much of a focus in enterprise networks as it should be. Great. By the way, I love that previous, in the previous slide, the last, sorry, I went on to the next slide now, but in the previous slide, the last bullet point mentioned frictionless access. It's just seamless access, but I love that term. I've grown to, that term has grown on me, frictionless access. I love that. And we can have that with Zero Trust. We can have it. So getting into, they get into some of the additional threat types, some of the threat icons that's utilized. Okay, so maybe I just need to take a step back. What are these threat icons? Where, how, why is it pertinent? It seems like there's something up with the threat icons. Well, I am moving towards a point in time where we'll be looking at we'll be looking at what Cisco calls business flows or business models. I think it's actually called business flows. And in these business flows, the idea is to identify the threat icons that speaks to data exfiltration, threat actors, malicious insiders, exploitation, or it's very specific exploitation that deals with a very particular technology. It could be, for example, something that deals with SQL injection or cross-site scripting, for example. So you could be identifying within your business flow, these are the elements that we are concerned about, and according to Cisco's recommendations, these are the technologies that we should be implementing, and also best recommended practice as to how aggressively those Cisco technologies should be implemented. That's where Zero Trust fits in. How aggressively do we need to implement Zero Trust in these security frameworks? At the moment, guys and girls, we're just looking at definitions. Malicious insiders, I'm thinking of disgruntled employees, for example. It can cause a lot of damage, especially if the malicious insiders are hailing from your security team, heaven forbid. These are uncomfortable discussions that you need to have in the organization as to how does your security policy consider or is cognizant of the fact that malicious insiders could be a problem later down the line for the organization. It, excuse me, apologies. It could be a very uncomfortable discussion to have, but it's one that you must have. You know, we have uncomfortable discussions with the people in our lives that we love the most. Your enterprise is nothing less. You're going to have some really uncomfortable discussions if it saves the organization and keeps the bottom line rolling, and your ability to pay people's salaries and them being able to have livelihoods. Hey, we're protecting livelihoods. That's definitely a uncomfortable discussion that most people, I think, in security would be willing to enter into. A bit of a different way of looking at it, right? But hey, there we have just a continuation of some of the threat icons continued. We've got advanced threats. When I'm looking at that very first one at the top, my mind can't help but being taken to advanced persistent threats. It's just one type of an advanced threat, but I see they've got a different example in there, looking at PHP code injection. Now, PHP is just what's it? It's programming, right? It's code that's typically utilized to design web pages. So if you can compromise the code in which the web page has been written, it stands to reason you'll be able to do some code injections, perhaps exfiltrate information, maybe do lateral movement, maybe do directory traversal, maybe focus on the web application, the back end of the web application that may exist on the web server. There's so many things we can do by doing some of these code injections. And some of my examples would include things like SQL injection. By the way, SQL injection is one of the most common web access hacks, for lack of a better word, that threat actors utilize to target web applications and your web servers. It is consistently voted in the top 3 on the OWASP, the OWASP, which is an organization that tracks in real time threats that organizations face and updates their lists as well as best recommended practices on the OWASP. And you feel free to go have a look at the OWASP top 10. And it then also strikes you that something like zero trust is an absolute must. We've got to be able to prevent unfiltered, unfettered access to our services just because a single user account has got access to permissions and authorizations that is not necessary for that particular individual. And we need to be able to dynamically not just allow, but also monitor those permissions. Great. For me, it's a permissions game. Give me an ISE. I've been privileged enough to deploy some of these ISEs in the past. For me, it's a really a permissions game. Everything else is, dare I say, smoke and mirrors. It's permissions, permissions, permissions. That's what the ISE does beautifully. And if you set up your permissions correctly on an ISE, many of these advanced threats, coupled with a well thought out strategy for your IPS and firewalls at the edge or perimeter of the organization, you can make it excruciatingly painful for these threat actors to execute these attacks. Then we're looking at malware and looking at malicious inside as well. Maybe just some words around malware. 0 days is always a big concern. Is there a way that we can leverage zero trust to mitigate malware attacks? The answer would be yes. It's more of a solution that involves multiple cogs that need to work together. But the idea that authentication allows us to identify devices that's trusted, doing full-on security posture assessments, has the potential to eliminate not all, but definitely some of these unnecessary zero-day malware attack exposure to the organization. You can also then argue the fact around utilizing Cisco's ISE to analyze telemetry and maybe pop some of that telemetry into a Cisco DNAC. I think it's now called the Cisco Catalyst Center, Cisco's SD Access solution, and then perform event analysis to identify potential indicators of compromise as soon as they rear their ugly heads. So there's multiple cogs that needs to work in unison in order to really drive home malware protection. But the solutions exist, and when you do jump onto a course like Cyber Core, for example, or some of the other security courses from Cisco that deals with SD-WAN security specifically, they go into those discussions, a nice deep dive that those courses allows you to get into. We're not going to go into that deep dive, but we're definitely going to try and do enough to whet the appetite. Are we not? We've got to try and whet the appetite. Okay, so let's see. We've got zero trust security frameworks, the need for comprehensive visibility of all network traffic down to the individual workload level for effective security management has never been more important. I think we've elegantly identified some of these reasons why we need zero trust in play, and it needs to be deployed across all of your security solutions and strategies as one of the core focuses of your security implementation strategies. They mention things like the ideal end state allows you to answer things like, can I control workloads moving laterally throughout the network? Do I understand the posture of my applications? This is where things like app dynamics works quite nicely. If you're doing a migration towards the cloud, how can we perform that migration securely and monitor after the migration is done and dusted that that your security policy is properly extended to this cloud platform. I think most people kind of look at cloud and think, well, there goes my data, there goes my privacy, there goes my everything. It's not the case. It's not the case. You can still exercise full control over your data and services and applications. It's also in the cloud service provider's best interest that their clients feel safe with them. So they also throw huge amounts of security at these solutions. And truth be told, is that many, if not most, of these cloud service providers, I'm not going to name names, but most of them do have built-in tools that is meant to supplement your existing security policy that relates to, in this case, zero trust. Some of these organizations have got their own security solution that deals uniquely with zero trust, but effectively, the fact that I'm trying to drive home is that security is a big deal for these organizations, so your data would be safe. Does it eliminate risk entirely? No one can tell you that, but we can bring down that risk level for your organization down to an acceptable level by also including the zero trust security framework from Cisco. Nice. And Cisco is a big name. And many of these organizations we see, like AWS and Azure and Google Platform in the last bullet point, they are keenly interested in working with Cisco to make sure that Cisco customers have got seamless implementation capabilities with the Cisco Zero Trust tools onto their platforms. Absolutely. I'm going to move on to the next slide. I think we can safely move on to the next one. Okay, so we've got zero trust security frameworks in step Cisco Safe. Man, oh man, what a model. Got all the right curves, but Cisco Safe is secure access for everyone. And the idea is that we're going to use Safe as a model to implement zero trust. Now, Cisco Safe is also a compartmentalized model in its own right. It looks at the various areas of your network. It looks at, for example, if look, it's a bit small on the screen, but effectively we're looking at things like the data center. We're looking at the network edge. We're looking at WAN connectivity modules, VPN connectivity modules, and everything in between that Cisco Safe as a reference design allows us to secure with various technologies. If you zoom in a little bit on some of the icons, you'll see things like Cisco WLC, you'll see Cisco ISE, the WSA, the ESA. You'll look at Cisco's SD-WAN and SD-Access and SASE solutions. And also, I think I've already identified the identity management capability and also integration capability of the Cisco ISE that practically has the ability to communicate with all of these elements. You can centralize control also in a very powerful way, utilizing this security reference design, SAFE. All of these components are meant to intercommunicate. They're meant to exchange security telemetry. And when you look at Cisco ISE, it also supports PX Grid services. And PX Grid allows you to even essentially make available telemetry, export that telemetry to a competing Cisco product. You even have the ability to import security telemetry from a competing product of Cisco. So that it definitely does tell us that Cisco is serious when it comes to your security. They can play ball with all of the other major vendors in terms of mixed environments and being able to complement those mixed environments as far as it is possible to do so with their zero trust security framework, SAFE. Great. I'm kind of looking at some of the other elements there. Well, apologies, it is a bit small, but hey, it's a powerful solution. There's a lot of elements in there, and it's not. There's no delusions of grandeur that you will be implementing all of this in one go. It's going to be a journey as you implement these elements, and only those elements that's pertinent to your organization. Securing the access layer through 802.1x, securing your VPN through IPsec and SSL technology at the edge, as well as authentication through the ISE, for example, that's integrated with Active Directory. The ability to also secure your web environment, your internet-facing services in the DMZ, not just through authentication and zero trust, but also all of these other technologies that SAFE brings to the table. The ability to look at app dynamics and look at whether the web application that you're utilizing is in fact utilizing secure coding practices to sanitize the input information before it is executed against some SQL server or Oracle server in the backend. All of these elements, because hey, your network is a string of elements that needs to interrelate and interwork, and your security solution needs to follow on the same methodology. Okay, let's take a quick 5-minute break, and then I'll start on the remaining topics after the break.
Sure, we are now going to take a 5-minute break, but before we do that, we are going to launch a quick poll that we want to invite you to participate in. Doing so helps us know how we can better serve you by telling us who might be interested in more information or in taking some additional training. In addition, we have a lot more informative webinars coming up, so please go to netcomlearning.com/webinars in order to register.
Welcome back, everyone. Let's continue from where we left off. Okay, I think we are safe to move on to the next slide deck. Good people of the palace. Zero trust common capabilities. We're just looking at some of the common capabilities of utilizing the SAFE methodology together with zero trust. And again, there's the capability icons. This time it's a bit of a different color. And we will be looking at the business flows slightly later on. But the last thing I'm going to do is show you the business flows right at the beginning. And then you've got no idea really how the individual sum of the components are actually, what are they meant to do? We're looking at the individual elements. And the idea from the start was to be able to string them together. The big question is, well, which of these capabilities should we string together? Which of these capabilities are fit for purpose for your organization? This is where we then have a discussion in the courses like Cyber Core, for example, that goes into it quite nicely, that identifies this is what you need to have in place if this is your eventual outcome. And no two organizations are alike. So the business flows that you would be looking at could be completely unique to your organization. And it's nice that you've got that flexibility and granularity in looking at these capabilities and the ability to only implement that which is needed, that which is pertinent to your business flow. It's a brilliant concept. I love the concept. It allows us to uniquely speak to the needs of the organization when it comes to zero trust implementation. Okay, so we're looking at the ability to do flow analytics if needed. I would argue most organizations would definitely be interested in getting flow analytics, and flow analytics just gives us the ability to identify not just the ability to detect applications and detect in terms of volumetric traffic, how these applications are accessed and utilized and how their services are being utilized. It also gives us a good idea to what extent zero trust is doing what it's supposed to be doing in terms of permissions and authorizations that allows access to these services, allows access to a VPN, that allows access to maybe MACsec level encryption at the switch level if you're implementing MACsec at the switch level for Edo 2.1x implementation. Great. So, in the world of security, it's the ability to do analytics, the ability to be able to make informed decisions based on accurate data is a very powerful feature. It's probably the most powerful feature of any security solution. Some guys would reckon that WellTeach, all these security vendors, they do the same thing. Yeah, sometimes you can probably get away with when somebody says a firewall's a firewall's a firewall. But what allows you to make quick decisions based on the flow analytics, based on the event monitoring capabilities of these devices, that's really where the big guys are going to be separated from, well, let's just say the not as big guys out there. So flow analytics is a big deal, and Cisco spends huge amounts of research and development making sure that these analytical capabilities allows you, it puts you in the driver's seat. So you can make decisions no matter whether your devices are generating thousands of logs every second. Flow analytics allows us to make short work and have full visibility onto what your security, as well as your devices and users and everything in between, are doing on the network. What are these devices doing on the network? Then we have identity authorization. I'm just looking at some of the capability names and just having a chat around my experiences with them and what we ultimately need to know about the basics of these capabilities as they ultimately fit into a larger picture. We're looking at the individual puzzle pieces. This one's blue with some green. That one's green with some blue. But they ultimately form part. They build this. They build the same picture. That picture is going to be unique for every organization, but these are the individual pieces on the board. Identity authorization is a key element. The ability to perform this dynamically is what Cisco is hammering on at the moment. with their zero trust and safe methodology and the latest security devices on the shelf out there at the moment. So we've got identity authorization that's typically going to be driven by a Cisco ISE appliance. I want to say ACS, but I've got to be honest, the last time I worked on an ACS was probably like 10, 15 years ago. I see the name pop up in some text from time to time, but I don't think it's going to be a accurate statement to include ACS in these discussions. If you've got an older ACS, yeah, it works. It does work. It's a very simplified AAA solution, but Cisco's ISE is way ahead of its time. Cisco ISE does identity authorization, it does authentication, it does accounting, it does TrustSec, the ability to use security group tags to identify how traffic flows through your environment based on the authentication authorization for users. We can base this authentication and authorization also around how users are connecting to the network. Maybe it's Wi-Fi, well, then this policy applies. If they hook up to a physical switch, that policy applies. If they terminate onto our network through a VPN, a separate policy applies. Only zero trust brings that kind of flexibility to the table. I think that's what I'm looking for. Great. So and then we've got anomaly detection right there at the top. What can I tell you about anomaly detection? It is also one of the mainstays of Cisco technology at the moment. The ability to detect an anomaly is key to any security operations center. We're getting now into SOC territory, where the SOC needs to be able to identify anomalous traffic. Remember that these anomalies are just anomalies until proven that they are the real deal. But I'll tell you this much. You deal with those anomalies as if they are the real thing until you prove that they are not a malicious threat towards the organization. So any indicator of compromise, which the text here refers to as anomalies, in a SOC we typically refer to as indicators of compromise. These indicators of compromise is then treated as the real thing, as a true positive, until we can prove that it's a false positive. If it is a true positive and we prove that it's a true positive, well, then escalation is required. In a typical SOC environment, that escalation would involve your business flows to then to elevate to, I would imagine, from a tier 1 SOC analyst to a tier 2 SOC analyst, for example. And then we move gears from anomaly detection to mitigation, essentially from threat hunting to, hey, we've now caught the threat. How do we respond? How do we mitigate? And any good security solution in terms of Cisco Safe and Zero Trust serves to try and prevent the worst from happening. And if the worst does happen, we have to be reactive. There's got to be a reactive plan as well. There's got to be an incident response plan. And governments around the world now dictate and require that organizations have an incident response policy, an IRP as it's referred to as typically, which includes your ability to respond to threats, not just prevent them, but actively respond to them. So anomaly detection, I would argue, would be part of the reactive approach, where the incident response team would be working very closely with the SOC in order to manage these anomaly detections. Something that I don't see that we've mentioned up until yet is Cisco XDR. So Cisco XDR, extended detection and response, allows us to perform anomaly detection functions and then identify these anomalies much quicker. And one of the big things with XDR that I've noted is that you can take your mean time to detection down to just mere minutes. The other thing that was quite interesting about Cisco's XDR is that it also, what's the other thing I want to mention to you? It's on the tip of my tongue. Apologies. It's sometimes so much I want to say, and then I get my tongue all twisted. But it'll probably get to me a little bit later on. But XDR is absolutely beautiful in terms of giving you the ability to identify quick analysis and then keep the rate of false positives to an absolute minimum. There we go. That's what I wanted to get onto, was the rate of false positives. When doing anomaly detection, the worst thing that you can do is to set up your policies so aggressively that you're being literally, your team is at the SOC level is literally inundated with false positives. And at some point, it will happen. It may not happen immediately, but it gets to a point where your team becomes desensitized. Say, well, there's a threat. It's probably just I've seen a million of these false positives. It's probably just another false positive. And it could be the real deal stepping through the door. And it goes undetected, goes under the radar because staff has been desensitized. That's horrible for any SOC, and we try and stay away from that as far as we can. And with anomaly detection technology from Cisco, and paired with Cisco XDR, you can keep the rate of false positives down to an absolute minimum, where it's a rate of 0.001%. That's how low the detection rate goes for false positives, where the rate for true positive detections is, well, I don't want to say 100%, but it's as close to 100% as you're going to get in the industry at current moment. Absolutely phenomenal what you can do with Cisco XDR. It was not too long ago that I was training these courses and telling guys, well, false positives, guys, it's just a fact of life. You're going to have to try and find the Goldilocks zone with your policy, not too aggressive. Don't make it to a point where it's not aggressive enough. You've got to find a Goldilocks zone for your organization. And I hated saying that, because I know that even if you find Goldilocks zone policy today, by this time next month, it could be completely useless to you. So using XDR is a game changer. It's absolutely a game changer. I think we are safe to move on to I think I've skipped one. Apologies. My bad. We are on the right one at the moment. Okay, multi-factor authentication. So multi-factor authentication is zero trust on steroids. Well, it's maybe not the best way to put it, but multi-factor authentication is such a big deal. All of these technologies are big deals, but few of them as big a deal as MFA. It sounds like a trivial solution, but it has huge repercussions if not implemented. Just a while back, probably about a year and a half ago, a organization, I think I'm not going to name names, but the most popular password manager, cloud-based password manager, was compromised, and the guys were going bonkers. Clients of this particular vendor, which is not Cisco. Cisco is not a password manager. They don't do password management in the cloud as their sole business. This company does it as their sole business. And these guys were compromised, and they are in the security game. The only clients of this particular password management solution vendor were clients that took the time to implement multi-factor authentication. Even if you don't like it, multi-factor authentication will probably save you at some point in the future. It's such an intrinsic part of zero trust as well, because we're saying that even though you've got things like single sign-on, we can leverage a much tougher authentication process to drive authorization by utilizing multi-factor authentication it essentially makes the authentication process much more robust. So you can utilize in-band and out-of-band channels to communicate authentication details to make virtually 100% sure that the person that's logging into your network, or that you're doing a transaction with, or this bank that you're communicating with and doing some transactions, that they are in fact who they say they are. So multi-factor authentication from an enterprise point of view, which is how we're looking at it, the angle that we're looking at current moment, multi-factor authentication allows you to then use multiple pieces of evidence, let's call it that. So you can have a username and a password. That's a single set of evidence. An additional set of evidence would be a biometric scan, would be a one-time PIN. One-time PINs are very, very popular. And the one-time PIN is then delivered to you via a different channel, as opposed to how you got the username and password, or where you type in the username and password. So it makes it much more difficult for an attacker or threat actor to obtain what that one-time PIN would be. Makes it virtually impossible. The amount of time that an attacker would need to spend on a user to try and get a deal on how they authenticate is going to be quite difficult. It's quite difficult, but it's not impossible. But we make it very, very difficult. Okay, then we get into discussions around the security orchestration automation response. It's a set of technologies that enables organizations to collect information monitored by the security operations team. Great. Well, that definition leaves out some of the good stuff. It's the good stuff right there, but if you think of security management, most people's minds go to a SIEM, a security information and event management system. That's a SIEM, SIEM. Now, a SOAR is seen as an extension to the existing capabilities of a SIEM. We're not throwing a SIEM out the window anytime soon, but we're adding SOAR, the ability to perform security orchestration and automation. The idea here is that we now would have what we call playbooks. So if a particular security event becomes evident, and there's a high confidence that this security event is in fact a true positive, then through security orchestration automation, you have the ability to now execute a security playbook, sometimes referred to as a recipe. Some guys call it manifests. I think most people just call it playbooks. So this playbook is really just a set of scripts, and the scripts automate how you respond to this particular threat. It's like getting a denial of service attack, a distributed denial of service attack, and you then have the ability through SOAR, SOAR, to immediately implement, as part of your event monitoring capability, identify that, hey, there's a DDoS playing out, a DDoS playing out, and we then pull closer the appropriate scripts and execute that allows you to now effect things like load balancing, or do DNS sinkholing, or do redirection, or try and absorb the traffic to a certain percentage level before you start indiscriminately dropping traffic, for example. All of these things can be instituted through scripts, through automation functions. And the idea is that once you get the call, say, hey, there's a DDoS taking place, you know that, well, you don't have to rush to the office or rush to the VPN connection to get onto these devices to do the clickety-click, next, command here, command there. The automation functions have responded in real time to the threat. I think that's the big takeaway from SOAR at this juncture. And we've got security assertion markup language, SAML, and single sign-on. And SAML is an open standard, and can extend enhance the login experience for users, and also lets them access multiple applications with a single set of credentials. That's one of the key takeaways with SAML. And we generally refer to this technology, and we sometimes use the two terms interchangeably to refer to the act of using a single set of credentials to log into your services as SSO, single sign-on. So single sign-on seems like It is potentially the antithesis to zero trust. And at face value, when I got into security first time, I looked at SSO, looked at zero trust. Well, these two technologies don't gel. They actually do. They actually do. We've got to try and look beyond just simple authentication and also consider authorization. When you consider what AAA does, a AAA solution like Cisco ICE, it does authentication that identifies the who behind the connection. And with single sign-on, there's a single who. It's Jack. So now we want to be able to give Jack permissions. That's where authorization fits in. The authentication is the who behind the connection. Authorizations are technically just the permissions. So the permission structures is then where the magic happens. And we give Jack just enough permissions to perform his job role on a particular service. If he wants access to additional service, well, Zero Trust says, hey, you're going to have to get re-authenticated or reauthorized for that service. You don't have a blanket policy to just hook up to these services. It's got to be monitored. It's authorization has got to be explicitly given, in this case by the ISE through policy that we set, and we then drive single sign-on to supplement zero trust. So the two technologies are actually deployed together quite often, where you don't need a separate set of authentication details for every service that a user wants to access, but you will most definitely be subject to authorization checks and balances in order to make sure that you access those services in a way that policy is good and going, and that policy gives us the green light to access those additional requested services if the authorization allows for it. It's all about policy. It's all about policy. And I have to say, the policies on a Cisco ISE can get very complex very quickly. And my recommendation to organizations would always be try and keep it as simple as is possible. Sometimes there's just no getting way around it, and sometimes things need to become complex. But I think to a large degree, keeping things complex, especially a security strategy, allows you to take charge of complex environments through a efficient security policy. You've got to try and make these policies efficient as far as it is possible to do so. Great, guys. I think it's safe to move on to the next slide. Let's see what we have. Some interesting pointers there. It seems like we've moved on to endpoint security solutions. Endpoint security deals with things like anti-malware, antivirus, device health connector. Now, we don't have the time and the space to put all of the capabilities in here, but the capabilities far extend beyond the capabilities that we see on the screen at the moment. This is just a taste of the capabilities that's available to us in Cisco Safe and Cisco Zero Trust approach. So let's have a quick look. We have anti-malware, antivirus, and device health connector. Great. I think before I get into them, what I would like to say is that we like Cisco. At Cisco, we pride ourselves in that we practice defense in depth. And defense in depth is a fancy way of simply saying that we don't keep all of our eggs in one basket. We keep them in different baskets. If one basket falls to the ground, well, it doesn't hurt all of the eggs, and the eggs are what we're trying to protect, right? That's what we're trying to protect. So the anti-malware, antivirus functions that we see here, your mind typically goes to, hey, that's the endpoint. The endpoint needs to implement this. But there's also network level anti-malware, antivirus capabilities within the SAFE architecture, SAFE architecture. You can perform full anti-malware protection, or AMP as we call it in Cisco land. You can do full-on AMP, advanced malware protection, on the Cisco IPS. You can do full AMP on Meraki. You can do full-on AMP on Cisco's firewalls, the ASA, the Firepower Threat Defense, and Firepower Management Center devices. You can do full-on AMP on the Cisco ISE. AMP's advanced malware protection isn't just what the endpoints will be scanning as data is inbound, but we'll be practicing defense in depth by deploying antivirus and anti-malware, not just at the endpoint level, but also at the network level. So we can gain a handle on preventing these malicious code payloads from entering the network to begin with. And even if they do, by some grace, if it comes down to policy, it comes down to sometimes just hard luck. I'll tell you guys this much. It's not in our nature to lie to our esteemed clients, but effectively, at some point, a compromise is going to happen, and you simply cannot stop it. And when it does happen, you've got to have a response plan. So even though we implement defense in depth, even though the network level does not prevent that infection, if it gets onto the client, at least you still have some of the anti-malware and antivirus capability that may catch it in the act, as we can now also perform things like operating system level sandboxing and CPU level sandboxing on the actual endpoint itself. Not just limited to PCs and laptops, but all the way up to smart devices, phones, even some IoT devices to a certain degree that can be implemented, that can implement these endpoint security solutions with great effect. The other thing that sometimes guys ask me in terms of endpoint security and how it affects authentication, and more specifically zero trust, is the ability to also get users to get them to, or get you as a net security administrator to enforce data loss prevention onto your users. It's kind of difficult to say users are going to force this onto themselves. That's why the tongue twist is there. But effectively, you can get DLP to be extended to any user. So devices that are under your administrative control, it's obviously easier to get these endpoint security agents deployed. Now, when it comes to other consumer-grade devices, it's a bit more intricate, because now you do not have administrative control over those devices. In those instances, you can still drive policy through, for example, an SSL portal, an SSL captive portal, as it's sometimes referred to as. So through SSL captive portal, company policies can be extended to devices that are not under our administrative control. But if they want to connect to us, if users, guests, contractors, or just want to connect to our network, we can then enforce that SSL capable portal that has the ability to also monitor what security posture the device is at the moment. And the user can also, from a user's perspective, the user also has the ability to say, well, no, I don't want you scanning my device. Well, in that case, sorry, you're not going to be able to access this environment of ours, this enterprise environment of the organization. So sometimes you also need to also consider the existing policies that's in play in the organization, best usage policies, in order to also squeeze the maximum value out of the safe and zero trust methodology from Cisco. I'm trying to get to the next slide. There we go. I'm on the next slide. Okay, I'm looking at security internet gateway. When I look at secure internet gateway, I'm thinking firewall. That's what I'm looking at. But I'm a bit old school when it comes to these things, but traditional borders don't exist anymore on today's networks. People used to think, hey, there's the firewall. Everything on the outside we don't trust. Everything on the inside we trust. Zero trust comes in and says, well, everything on the outside we still don't trust. And then everything on the inside we also don't trust intrinsically. Everything that you want to access has got to be duly authenticated. And this is what this section makes me think of. The firewall that typically represents the traditional border has now become a device that breaks down this border and extends the organization security policy onto cloud services. And this is where we start having discussions around cloud access security brokers that they mention here is an intermediary device or solution between cloud providers or between you and the cloud service provider that allows consumers to enforce an organization's security policies and usage. People don't think it funny these days. You know, there was a time that people thought it funny. Hey, I'm going onto the internet to do business, to access company resources. Now, most company resources is on a cloud service provider solution of some sort. It's out there. It's got to be protected. And we do have some very powerful CASB solutions, cloud specific solutions in the Cisco store that specifically speaks to this requirement. I've had a bit of a talk around data loss prevention earlier, so I'm not gonna get into it again, but from any perspective, data loss prevention is a key element for endpoint security. It's a key element for cloud security as well, because you don't want to be able, of course, you don't want to get to a point where you share extremely sensitive information with a cloud service provider only to turn your back and the cloud service provider gets hacked. It's always a possibility. It's with any new technology, there's always, with any penetration into new technologies or onto the internet, it carries inherent risks. You'll never be able to eliminate those risks, but we have to know that they're there. We have to be able to try and utilize these methodologies as far as it is possible to secure the data, well, for lack of a better word, as far as it is possible to do so. But if the worst happens, there's got to be a response. And this is where the trick also lies in the world of security, is the quicker you can respond to a threat, the more you can minimize resulting damages. So the ability to keep down your mean time to detection is key. So even if that attack does come through, at least now you know, and you've got the ability to respond, to mitigate in as short a time frame as is possible. Time is money, and it's probably more so true in the world of security, because if these guys are allowed to roam, and by guys I mean threat actors, if the threat actors are allowed to access these environments and stay undetected for a period of 200 days, which is the industry norm at the moment, unfortunately, they own that network. They absolutely own it, which is not where we want to be at. We want to do quite the opposite. We want to be able to make sure that our networks are, in fact, safe harbors of company data. Okay, I see DNA security there at the bottom. DNA security is also an interesting one. DNA security is technology that allows us to access the internet. It's such a critical element. It's such a powerful technology as well. And it is unfortunately one of those technologies that is readily targeted by attackers. Things like DNS poisoning, DNS server poisoning, DNS cache poisoning. The fact that most DNS requests online are sent in clear text, you can see what people are trying to access by simply listening in, eavesdropping in on these DNS conversations. And in many cases, it's really not that difficult. I would even argue most enterprises, with the pen test that I've done, it's not difficult to perform a complete DNS zone transfer. It's the simplest thing to do. And now you've got the information that's on the DNS server. So you can now see from a DNS zone transfer exactly what is important for that organization in terms of their servers, in terms of hard-coded IP addresses and host names and domain names. It's a bonanza for a threat actor. We have to try and protect DNS security, and we need to be able to do a couple of things in order to do so. First off is try and get away from clear text DNS. So Cisco does support the ability to perform DNS over HTTPS. I see many vendors are now jumping on board in terms of operating systems that now support this very baseline technology. Cisco also supports DNSSEC or DNS extensions that also further secures DNS servers. Cisco also runs a service called Umbrella, which is a service specifically geared towards protecting an organization's DNS infrastructure, preventing all of the nasties above, as well as loads more, from downing or compromising your DNS environment. You know, the easiest way to break into somebody's bank account is probably, you know, spoof the banking site, attack their DNS solution, get the DNS server to forward them to the attacker's IP address instead of the banking service. And once that attacker runs a credential harvesting mechanism and the user puts in their details, it's game over. Absolutely game over. It's a simple yet extremely widely deployed attack because it's so successful. So DNS security is a big deal for us. And it's not just about keeping now your environment safe, it's also keeping our users safe. And being able to extend this DNS security to small offices and home offices, I think, is also very, very pertinent. Great. So Cisco, let's see, there's a continuation here. We're looking at applications, dependency mappings, continuous vulnerability scanning, micro segmentation of the network environment as well, so that we can perform infrastructure capabilities here to only allow certain services and not others. Services that we don't use, shut down. It's very simplified, but also a very powerful means of hardening the existing security environment. We've got patch management, which is key. I'm a big fan of patch management. It just cannot be overemphasized. At the end of most of my security courses, I would argue to delegates, sometimes they ask, well, teach which of these elements, if I'm allowed to implement only two, which two would it be? And I would argue patch management and multi-factor authentication. I would argue for those two. It's a personal recommendation. But in my experience, together with Zero Trust, getting multi-factor authentication, which in my mind is definitely a cornerstone of Zero Trust, and also implementing patch management to make sure that attackers are not able to easily identify vulnerabilities on your operating systems and services that's in the listening state on your network. That is absolutely key. You know, I would argue that your network is probably scanned every other 5 minutes by somebody on internet relay chat looking for open services, using simple free tools like Nmap, for example. And if they can find something that is in the listening state, using Nmap, you can also identify what version software is running or what version of the service is running. Then it becomes simple and easy to identify vulnerabilities. And then what's stopping the attacker from using an exploit kit to exploit that particular vulnerability? So you can literally have the amount of attacks possible on your services just by keeping patches updated. I've seen it time and time again where software gets compromised because it's running outdated software. It's a scourge of our time, my dear delegates. Outdated software, it's a big no-no. So the following internet edge capabilities are included in Zero Trust. We're looking at DDoS, remote access VPNs, reverse proxy, software-defined wide area networks. I'm going to kind of speak in circles if I go into these technologies now, because I've identified the high points, and they are true for all of these various sections or compartmentalizations of your network, whether it's SD-WAN, whether you've centralized the control plane on a single APIC controller, or you still do it the old way by getting into devices, CLI, and drop in configs and scripts manually to those devices. The idea still stands that the authentication behind it needs to make sure that if that account is exposed, the attacker doesn't get more than what they bargained for. They limit it very specifically only to a certain set of functions. Now, obviously, the administrator account is going to be a bit of a different ballgame, and we do spend more time and effort securing the administrative accounts because they typically do have more privileges in order to perform the security functions that a security admin would typically need to do. Great, remote access VPNs, and all of these elements would have a authentication authorization aspect to it. Great, we're looking at, I've already mentioned distributed denial of service attacks that typically targets the edge of your internet infrastructure or the edge of your organization, enterprise edge or perimeter. Looking at reverse proxy, this allows users to securely access on-premise websites, web applications from anywhere in the world without having to install special software on their devices. However, you do want a measure of authentication and zero trust authorization to allow them to access this particular feature. So, guys, we're very close to the end, I believe. We've got just the business flows and just a quick iteration of how these business flows would look like. These are purely just examples. There's probably many more on Cisco's website. I've tried to put in as much as I can in terms of applications, in terms of on-premises deployment of guest access, for example. Any scenario that you play out in your network environment in terms of requiring access, requiring authentication and authorization to access a specific set of resources, these business flows allows you to identify these specific capabilities, Cisco capabilities that can be deployed in virtually any business flow. Great, there we've got zero trust business flows, threat vectors. The next step in the safe methodology, the slide says, is to identify the threats for each business flow. And this is the attack surface and the mitigation of these threats that the business wants to have solved. There must be a solution to solve it. Then we have zero trust business flows with regards to capability mapping by the zero trust pillar. The mapping of security capabilities to zero trust pillar are represented in the diagram that's seen. Now, the idea here is that in the previous sections, we've identified the business flow for authentication requirements, and then to the second slide was to identify the actual threats, and to try and mitigate those threats, we've got to have a firewall in place and maybe an IPS and maybe some umbrella functionality to secure the DNS infrastructure. And this specifically looks at the capability trust pillar to what extent are we going to extend trust. This more specifically speaks to zero trust, in that we have to extend trust to entities within the organization. It doesn't stop there. We also sometimes need to extend trust to clients on the internet. Business partners, for example, also need to be able to have a certain trust relationship before we can access each other's resources in a certain way. So there's also a business flow that deals specifically with that. Great, I see, well, it seems like we've reached the end of our section. I'd like to thank you very much.
Thank you, Wesley. That was most informative. Now, I know everyone is looking forward to the Q&A session, so go ahead and start putting in your questions into the question panel. And while you're doing that, I'd like to give the presentation rights over to Natika Singh, our Deputy Manager Product Marketing, who's going to introduce our promotions and webinar-related courses.
Thank you for extending the opportunity to speak with the audience today. I hope the session was informative and it added value to your learning experience. You can watch the event recording by clicking the Access Recording button here. Now, I would like to highlight Netcom learning capabilities and why we are the best when it comes to training and learning services, recognized by Microsoft as the winners of the Partner of the Year Awards 2 years in a row. 2023 and 2022, we excel in guiding organizations to achieve peak performance while addressing their challenges through comprehensive organizational learning solutions. Our dedication since 1998 has led us to service over 80% of Fortune 1000 companies and served 100 plus US military bases. We have trained over 1 million professionals and helped 36,000 plus organizations achieve their business goals. We have a huge portfolio of more than 3,300 certified trainers who are subject matter experts in their domains. Our dedication to providing customized learning methods is why we are awarded as the top 20 IT training companies by trainingindustry.com. Moving ahead, being a platinum learning partner of Cisco, I would like to announce our upcoming schedules of Cisco training that you can explore through this handout. To add value to your learning curve, we encourage you to leverage free on-demand training and blog on Cisco certifications. If you would like to maximize your Cisco ROI with unlimited access to in-depth training and hands-on labs, then enroll in our Cisco U Essentials and Cisco U All Access subscriptions. Cisco U is a digital learning experience that recommends personalized content for each learner spanning through Cisco and Cisco adjacent technologies, including unlimited access to hands-on labs. Cisco U is more than just a digital learning subscription. It's a thriving community of learners and creators for learning and growing. As a Cisco Platinum Learning Partner, Netcom Learning helps organizations purchase authorized Cisco training with Cisco Learning credits to increase the technical competencies of their employees and deliver greater technology returns. Cisco Learning Credits, or CLCs, are prepaid training vouchers redeemed directly with Cisco that help you purchase, redeem, and manage Cisco training courses. You can use your CLCs to upgrade your team's expertise with our authorized Cisco training available for public and private training schedules. You can also take the advantage from Learning Passport, which is Netcom Learning solution, to flexible team training. It is designed to be customized for the number of learners you train on top technology vendors like Microsoft, Cisco, CompTIA, Adobe, and more. The single package can be redeemed for over 4,000 plus official courses with a validity of 12 months. I would like to introduce you to Netcom Plus Learner subscription, which is complimentary for all the attendees. Netcom Plus provides you access to more than 400 e-learning courses across various technologies and vendors. I would recommend you all to visit Netcom Learning's website for more information on our courses and certifications, free virtual events, our latest blogs and ebooks, and promotion offers. If you want to build a smarter workforce and drive business growth, I highly recommend you go through the book Building an Innovative Learning Organization by Russell Sarder, CEO of Netcom Learning. You can easily find this book on Amazon. For the latest updates on IT and business training, follow us and subscribe to our social media handles. Thank you for joining us. Have a great day.
Thanks so much for guiding us through that valuable information, Natika. And now we're going to go ahead and jump right into our question and answer session. If you haven't yet, it's not too late to pop your questions into the question panel. What is the difference between zero trust and the principle of least privilege? And can they be used together?
The answer to that would be a resounding yes. There was a bit of a discussion around this in the slide deck where we identified the principles of zero trust and why it should be utilized. And then least privilege is effectively the ability of getting only those authorizations through for a user, the absolute minimum in order for them to perform a job role or job function. So I would argue that the two would absolutely be complementary of each other. They can be used together, and they often are used together to maximize the effect of zero trust. It's not an absolute must that you have to implement it, but I would absolutely have a good night's rest if I've advised an organization to also consider least privilege together with zero trust. Absolutely right.
What methodology does Cisco use to drive zero trust throughout the enterprise?
Great. I love that question. It's a pivotal question. And sometimes we can just throw terms at these questions, but the crux of the matter, and I believe the crux of the question is what's the mindset behind the methodology that Cisco utilizes? Well, we've looked at the methodology. The name of the methodology is SAFE. So we implement Zero Trust through the SAFE, Secure Access for Everyone, SAFE methodology, that utilizes the concept of business flows. And that's the methodology that we try and get behind with the Zero Trust that we can implement throughout the enterprise, anywhere onto the cloud, onto business partners, extending trust relationships through those business flows. It's all business flows. And it's a brilliant concept because you can compartmentalize the business flows into the sum of its parts to identify exactly what your requirements are as an organization, and then implement those Cisco technologies that's built specifically to secure those elements. Like, for example, Umbrella securing DNS, ICE, Cisco ICE taking care of your authentication and identity management, and to a large degree, all of your AAA and TrustSec requirements as well. To a similar degree, where a Cisco wireless LAN controller through simple localized authentication can also drive Zero Trust for localized user onboarding, for example. And we can extend this all the way out to something a bit more fancier like Cisco Meraki that allows you to implement Zero Trust through the policies and the online cloud dashboard that you would typically associate with Cisco Meraki. Great. I hope that answers that question.
Do I understand the posture of my applications, and are they compliant with industry best practices?
So it seems like a very detailed question, and the basic idea behind it, I believe, is simply to make sure that you're on top of the posture of physical devices that's jumping onto your network, as well as the users, no doubt. And Cisco tools do have the ability to enable compliancy checks to make sure that you are compliant with things like ISO 27001, compliant with HIPAA, compliant with the GDPR, which is more so on Europe side. And of course, anything that is very specific to your particular region, you have the ability to make sure that you can drive compliancy, make sure that the posture of your applications are in fact in good order, and all the while staying up with the latest and greatest regulations that may be region specific or global specific. If you refer to the PCI DSS, would be a classic example of driving compliancy with regards to Zero Trust and posture assessments of your applications through the SAFE methodology. Great. I believe that's all we've got time for today. I want to thank you for joining us on this session, and thank you for joining us on this Netcom session looking at Zero Trust. It's been a privilege to have you guys here. Thank you.
Once again, I want to remind you that as you leave this session today, you will be presented with a short survey. We would like to request for you to help us by taking a quick moment to participate in that survey. Your feedback really helps us understand your learning experience, as we are constantly looking at how we can improve our future sessions. The survey answers are measured on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 representing outstanding and 1 representing poor. We want to thank all of you for joining us today, and if you do come up with any additional questions, feel free to send them to webinar@netcomlearning.com at any time. We hope that you found today's webinar informative, and we look forward to seeing you back here with us soon. Feel free to tell your friends and colleagues about our webinars and other courses. Have a great day, everyone.